Welcome back to Grace, the Parent Survival Kit. This is video session number 11. We left off by reading Titus chapter 2, verse 11. I'm going to repeat it. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men. Salvation is complete peace and full restoration of all things. So man, created by God, has his own sense of self-righteousness. In this self-righteousness, he has determined self to be his God. In so, he disses God when he holds any opinion apart from God. How's that even possible? Laughing. Think about it. Man, created by God, comes up with his own opinion about God's righteousness and about God and about self, and makes himself self-righteous by having any opinion. Who are we to have an opinion apart from God? So therefore, his opinion about God or about anything else above God has become the God. So he's replaced truth of God with his own self-understanding and awareness. Can you imagine how futile that is? Romans 10:9 through 10, verse 13 says that if you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Okay, so think about this. So even the confession with your mouth isn't enough. That's an act. So if I confess with my mouth, Jesus is Lord, that's not enough. That's an act. That's me doing. I have to believe in my heart that God raised Jesus from the dead. When I believe in my heart, I receive the truth of what God is saying about Jesus. So I'm receiving it. So it says, continues on to say, for with the heart the person believes, resulting in righteousness. So it's a belief, it's a faith. We receive the truth that only Jesus can save us. And with that, we confess with our mouth, resulting in salvation. But it had to be received in our heart first. Whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. Now, what if I'm a deaf mute and I can't speak? What if somebody cut my tongue out? Will that prevent me? Of course not. It's the belief in your heart that matters. So it's not about our behavior. It never has been. It never has been. If we can't behave righteously to get into the kingdom, we can't, because our righteous behavior in this case is not enough to satisfy God. So once we're in the kingdom, our unrighteous behavior can't possibly get us out. How? That would put our behavior above God. And so our negative behavior, once we're saved, can't possibly lose the salvation because that would make us bigger than God. Think about that for a minute. Our behavior, good or bad, has nothing to do with this whole thing. Never has, never will. Satan wants you to think that way, and the enemy wants so that you get focused on your own behavior and all the things you do poorly and all that trauma and all that vile and all that nastiness so you can fix yourself. If you only learn to do this and this and this and this, you'll be okay. No. God's grace in you will do it all. John 3:17 says, For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Any form of self-righteousness or self-importance or self-anything is a form of evil. It's apart from God. 1 Peter 5:10 says, After you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself perfect, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. So I'm going to look at 1 Peter chapter 5:10, and I know what it says. It's right there in front of us. And then I'm going to go to this other person who says, if you just do this method, if you just do this process, if you just do this, then you will be perfected and confirmed and strengthened and established you. That's in direct contradiction to what God is saying here in his word. The God of all grace, after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace who has called you, past tense, to his eternal glory in Christ. That means eternal forever and ever and ever. He will himself perfect you. confirm you, strengthen you, and establish you. I take that. I don't want a method. I don't want to try to make myself better. I'll take God. When anyone determines that their opinion is fact or more important than any other opinion, for any reason, they have positioned themselves as a form of God, period. Especially when they attempt to fight and battle for their supposed righteous position. I have no opinion other than God's opinion about God. And we know God's opinion about God by reading his word. I accept that word and I receive it fully as truth. And then I stand in that grace and operate in that grace, and I expect to receive the fullness of being blessed as a believer. And do not be conformed, Romans 12:2. And do not be conformed to this world. Don't believe them. Don't follow them. That you can be better by your own efforts. That you can improve by your own efforts. Sure you can. Everybody can improve by their own efforts. But it doesn't get you closer to God. It doesn't get you purer to God. You already have it. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That whole word, that sentence, is something that's perpetual, that goes. It's like a past tense, a future tense, and a present tense all at once. It never stops. So that you may prove what the will of God is. That which is good and acceptable and perfect. So the will of God is his opinion. If you align yourself with him and you're in a complete communion and in association with him because you've received his truth, now you know what is acceptable and perfect because you're one with him. Not when you're separate in your own opinion, trying to decipher what is true and not. That would be sin. So we started this e-course by stating grace is the absolute goodness of God. We stated this boldly because the Bible declares it so, and we stand by it. So enjoy your parent survival camp. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. As we have contended that grace is the absolute goodness of God, it's a free gift from God himself so that he can confirm and establish you and bless you with everything. We believe only the absolute goodness of God changes everything. In the presence of that absolute goodness, we are changed. Not by changing ourselves in any way. Knowing God's heart, which is the heart of love, the actual heart of God will transform. If we get in the presence of God's heart, think about this, this is God and his heart. You don't think you'll be transformed, completely changed? I don't know that you can even stand in front of the love of God in his full love. I don't think I can. I'm just weighted down. Every time I'm in the presence of God, I am weighted down. I can't move. What is the absolute goodness of God look like? Let me answer that question with a question. Have you ever seen someone who is obviously blessed by God, highly favored, filled with joy and peace and love, and you know it has nothing to do with their behavior? You just know they're just filled with joy, no matter where they go, no matter what they do. Now picture Jesus healing the sick, the lame, and the blind. See him raise the dead. Now look into the eyes of those who are healed. Look right into their eyes of their children, of their spouses, and their loved one. And you tell me that they did anything. They just received the healing, but can you imagine the beauty that comes out day after day after day for that family, for the spouse? Let's say it was me, and let's say I'm paralyzed. All of a sudden, God comes in and raises me up, and I'm walking. Now, can you imagine what my family thinks? You think the love that we have now? Grace did that. What about those attending the funerals that Jesus ruined? So we go back and we read the Gospels and we realize that Jesus went around raising the dead and he was ruining these funerals. Do you think anybody was upset the funeral got ruined? Or do you think they were a bit too busy celebrating the fact that the one they were mourning that's dead is now alive, walking, talking, and amongst them? Can you imagine the joy and the celebration that followed the resurrection of somebody who had died? That's grace. It's the absolute goodness of God. see in your mind's eye Jesus raising somebody from the dead and looking at the dead person who was raised and all the loved ones and the friends, can you imagine? God's absolute goodness transforms us. He makes us look like somebody who's been blessed because we are. The Colossians were blessed. Would you agree? We're going to read that on the next session. So that's where we're going to stop. We'll see you on the other side.